Okay. In order to understand what's happening today, what's going on in the world today, you have to look back at history to understand what's happening. Most people don't pay enough attention to history, and you know that there's an old saying: if you don't pay attention to history, you're bound to relive it. Yeah, and I'm going to go back to the Napoleon War. Back in the time of the Napoleon War, Nathan Rothschild, one of the three Rothschild sons, was heavily invested in the Bank of England. One of the other Rothschild sons was heavily invested in the Bank of France. And the third Rothschild son was involved in the Bank of Germany. Now, the Rothschilds also were involved in arms, producing arms. So they stoked up and helped to promote the war between England and Napoleon. They were deeply involved in making that happen. Now, as the war went on, they made money from the arms corporations, from the arms that they owned, and also they were invested in the banks. Now, when Napoleon lost the war, Nathan Rothschild in England had spies that got to him before England found out that England won the war. And Nathan went and stood around and looked all glum and was selling his stock in the Bank of England. But in the meantime, he had his agents buying the stock for him. So when a lot of investors who were invested in the Bank of England saw Rothschild was selling, they sold and they took a loss. Because the bank, the more they sold, the more the stock in the bank went down. And Rothschild had his agents buying up all the stock. By the time the word got back to England that England had won the war, Nathan Rothschild now controlled the Bank of England. And now in France, the French people were in debt to the other Rothschild, so they were being taxed more in order to pay back the loans that the Rothschilds had given to France for the war. Now, to move forward in history a little bit, when we had the Bank of America, which was, the Rothschilds involved were trying to run, what did they call the bank, original American bank?
Central Bank?
Yeah, the Central Bank of America, right? And that was basically mostly Rothschild money involved in that. And they ran America into debt, and
I thought they got rid of the central bank. I thought Jackson did that.
Yeah, Jackson did that, and then they were trying to bring it back.
Okay.
Right? And Lincoln was not really for it, and so they wanted to collect, since America was in debt, they were calling in the debt. Now, at the time, the southern states were richer than the northern states, because machines and factories and stuff like that were just starting in the northern states. But the southern states, because they had slavery and they had cotton and tobacco, and the southern states were richer. So when it came time to pay the national debt, the southern states said, the northern states said the southern states should cover the biggest part of it, and the southern states said, no, we shouldn't pay for the debt for the north. And that was really what brought about the division between the North and the South. It was not so much about slavery, even though they used slavery to try to control, to try to dominate, from the North to dominate the South, that by freeing the slaves and economically crippling the South. But when the South said, we're not going to pay the debt for the North, that's when Rothschilds said, we're going to, and the Rothschilds were deeply involved in creating our Civil War, between the North and the South. And that was because they wanted a central bank again. Now, I'm going to jump forward. Also Lincoln said, we're not going to borrow from the bank. If we borrow from the bank, then we got to pay interest. So we're going to create our own currency. And Lincoln started using the Treasury, and he created what was called back then greenback dollars, right? And the bankers didn't like that, and that was the reason that Lincoln was assassinated, because he was going to make the country run on, have the Treasury print our money, which is the way our Constitution said it's supposed to be. Now, I'm going to jump to the future a little bit about Kennedy. Kennedy was going to do the same thing. Kennedy was going to get rid of the Federal Reserve, and he was getting ready to print money from the Treasury that would have been interest-free, which would have kept America from going deep into debt. And that was why Kennedy was assassinated. Now I'm going to jump to the Great Depression of 1929. The bankers created, what they did was they made the stock market go up and up and up, and all the stocks were overinflated. They were valued much higher than what the real value of the stocks were. And the bankers knew what they were doing. They kept putting it up. Then the bankers pulled out their money and let the American people, who thought, oh, the stock market's going up and we're going to make money. And a lot of Americans then bought into the stock market, which was overinflated. Then the bankers, the Rothschilds and the Warburgs and
Rockefellers?
And the Rockefellers and J.P. Morgan and Henry Ford, the real rich people in this country, then shifted all that money that they had, because they had pulled it out of the stock market, into Germany. And Germany became an economic power. They had factories in Germany producing, while America they had the Depression. They crashed the stock market. Now all the American people lost money, lost jobs, and all the money, the rich people put all their money into Germany and invested in factories and everything over in Germany under Hitler. Now, while we had the Depression here, the bankers again, farmers lost their farms. The bankers bought them at pennies on the dollar. Factories went out of business. The bankers bought them pennies on the dollar. And because they had laid off so many people were unemployed, they killed any unions that were starting to happen. And people were willing to work just to get bread on the table, to put a little food on the table. They were working for slave wages. Now this was all created intentionally. The bankers knew what they were doing. Now, then, because we had a Great Depression, and the bankers made all the money from Germany was producing everything. They had the factories going. So now the bankers turned around and started pulling some of the money out of Germany and reinvesting and rebuying the United States, rebuilding our factories here, and then they promoted the war, World War II, in order to get us. World War II is what got America out of the Great Depression. If we hadn't have done that, gone into World War II, and factories started producing, which was making the bankers and the arms dealers and all the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Schiffs, the Warburgs, the Rockefellers, J.P. Morgan, making all those guys mega rich, right? Then we went to war with Germany. Now, while the war was going, they were making money off German factories producing war material. They were making money off American factories producing war material, and they devastated huge swaths of Europe, Germany. Now all that land could be bought cheap. That's what war does. They were buying up all that land and all that infrastructure that had been destroyed, and they had made so much money that they could buy it all. The same thing they were doing here in America. They bought up all the farms, they bought up all the factories, especially the pharmaceutical and petrochemical stuff. They put all their money and railroads into big money that they made. Now let's jump to the future now, to what's happening now. Once again, the stock market has been so overinflated, and the rich guys, they just kept buying stock and reselling it back and forth. One guy'd sell it to the other guy to knock the price up, and then they'd sell it back to the other guy, to these rich guys, buying it amongst themselves, selling it back and forth, knowing what they're doing, knocking the price up. Oh, everybody wants this stock, so the price is high on it. And then everybody wants this stock, so the price is high on it. You know, and what they're doing is they're selling back and forth among themselves and inflating the price, bringing the price up higher and higher. Then they get people to put in, the pension funds start buying into it, and common everyday people start saying, well, look, this stock is going crazy. I should buy now. And then once again, the rich fat cats and the bankers pull their money out of the stock market, right? And invest and start buying up real estate, gold, silver, stuff that has value. And what are they doing? What are they buying it with? They're buying it with, they brought in the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is printing paper, which is worthless. Our Constitution said money should be coined, gold and silver should be money. But they got the government to do away with that, and start taking paper. Now, the bank could print up all the paper they wanted, and it didn't.
IOUs, right?
Right, and they could take that paper. Let's say if I had a bank and I could print paper, I could print a couple millions of dollars, and then I could go out and buy factories with paper that's worthless. I could go buy farms with paper that's worthless, right? And then eventually.
Well, Joe, people didn't think it was worthless.
No, the people have been scammed. That's what I'm trying to tell people, how they've been scammed, you know. Then they buy government bonds, right? Our government. Well, first of all, now I also want to tell you about our supposed government. We don't have a constitutional government. Right now, what we have is a corporate government. If you look on what is it?
Dun and Bradstreet?
Yeah, Dun and Bradstreet. The government of the United States is a corporation. So now we have a corporation producing, what are the notes that the government produces?
Federal Reserve notes.
No, the Federal Reserve produces Federal Reserve notes, and then, they buy bonds. So they're buying bonds from the corporate government of the United States. And what the corporate government of the United States is bankrupt, folks. And the Federal Reserve is given funny money paper to buy bonds from a bankrupt corporate United States. Now,
who can't secure the bond.
Right, who can't secure the bonds. They got actually nothing to back it. Now, what they're trying to do is say the bonds are backed by by the good credit of the American people. Trying to say that when every time they give a bond to the Federal Reserve, we the people take on the debt. But a corporation does not have the authority to do that. We have two governments. We have a constitutional government, which is kind of underground and no one talks about it, and but that was the founding of our country. It still exists. We still have constitutional government, even though our politicians have sold out and all signed in to the corporate government. Now, the corporate government doesn't have any assets. The corporate government does not own the United States, does not own all the states united. They don't own New York, they don't own New Jersey or Boston or Georgia or Florida, but they're acting like they do. It's all smoke and mirrors, and they're trying to say that when they make bonds, which right now, because of this coronavirus epidemic, right, and they've put so many people out of work, and they've closed down bars and restaurants and factories and every place. That's all to, once again, like during the Great Depression, they closed down all the factories. They made it go bankrupt so that the American people would all be in the bread lines and be starving. And when they were starving, then the rich people could say, oh, we're opening a factory, but we're only paying pennies, And because a man wanted to feed his family, he would take any job he could get, even at slave labor wages. Well, they're doing the same thing right now. They're creating mass unemployment in this country to make people, instead of us having unions where we get a fair wage, people are going to be fighting for jobs because there's not a lot of jobs. And that's, again, the bankers and the rich fat cats all doing this to control the people. But like I said, we have two governments. We have the government of we the people, the constitutional government, and then we have the corporate government. Now, the corporate government has been acting as if it was a constitutional government, but it's not. It's incorporated. It has a Dun and Bradstreet number. That corporation has no assets. So when the Federal Reserve is buying bonds from that corporation, it's giving worthless paper that's being given out to the people and actually given back to the bankers so they can purchase more stuff, right? And then they're taking bonds from a bankrupt corporation and getting worthless bonds. But then they're not telling the people what's happening, and they're trying to make the people believe that this debt is going to be passed on to our children and our grandchildren, and the slave labor is going to be passed on to our children and our grandchildren, because Trump right now has taken trillions of dollars from the Federal Reserve and dumping it into the stock market, where the rich people are getting back in, and because all this money's pouring in, and they're getting the money, and they're using that money to buy land, to buy things. It's everything that's been being done by the Federal Reserve, by the World Bank, by the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers. It's all been criminal, folks. And it's time for the American people. And that's one of the reasons that some of the first things that Donald Trump did when he got in there was he knew the Russians were trying to help him get elected. The Russians wanted him to get elected because the Russians want to destroy our democracy, right? And Putin, not necessarily the Russian people, wanted to destroy our democracy. So it's still Putin sees America as a threat and wants to take down America. So Trump is Putin's boy. Putin helped to get him elected. Mueller, who was doing the study or the investigation into the Russian interfering in our election, what did Trump do? He fired him, got rid of him. Then the next guy who come along, I forget his name, also was looking into it, and the FBI was looking into it. What did Trump do? He fired them. Then CIA, who is supposed to be watching out for America and would be watching the Russians, what did Trump do? He fired the head of the CIA. And Trump has put in all new people, and none of them are looking at what the Russians are doing, trying to destroy our democracy. So now you got all this going on. Everything that Trump has done would be what Putin would want done, to take out the FBI, who would be looking into what the Russians are up to, the CIA, who would be looking into our national intelligence, who would be looking into and protecting us from Russian interference or the Russians trying to overthrow our country. Trump has taken all those people out, and put in people who won't look into what the Russians are doing. So what we have now, folks, is the Federal Reserve and the rich bankers who created this stock market bubble and then pulled their money out, let all these people lose their pensions and their 401ks or whatever, it's the people that are taking the burn on this. And then
I think the Russian people are suffering too.
The Russian government is corrupt. The American government is completely corrupt. The Chinese government is completely corrupt. The people are just being used and played as pawns, And now that they've created another depression, just like we did, I told you before, during World War II, we had 1929 was the Great Depression. In order to get out of that Great Depression, they needed a war. And they started the war, and they built up our economy, and they got rich making arms and planes, boats, guns. The fat cats, the bankers, all benefited from that. Who got hurt? The people. Our soldiers that went to war got killed behind a war that was just started, and not we, but the bankers, the Rothschilds, the
Rockefellers,
they invested in Germany. So when we went to war with Germany, they profited. The same thing, like I said, during the Napoleon War. The Rothschilds financed England, and the Rothschilds financed France. If they financed both sides of a war and loaned money to the governments and supplied the governments with arms, they just do nothing but make profit. Then the war...
Merchants of death.
Yeah. Then the war destroys property. Then they can come in and buy that property up for pennies on the dollar, and then they rent it out, to the people at a high rent. So this is what's
rubles on the dollar.
Yeah, rubles on the dollar, or yen on the dollar, or whatever Chinese. What's Chinese?
Yuan.
Yuan on the dollar. It's all a big scam, folks. But the good news is, we have a constitutional form of government. We never did away with that constitutional form of government. It's up to we the people to start saying, no, this corporate government does not control us. This corporate government, we the people who made the Constitution, recognize only our constitutional government and our constitutional form of government. This corporate government has sold the people out every kind of way. You can't trust the senators, the congressmen, it don't matter, Republican, Democrat. All take money from big corporations who are controlled by the big banks, by the mega rich people. And it's time for the American people to wake up and start demanding our constitutional form of government. And unless we do, then what they're going to say is the corporate government that they've created has now run up debts, and they're going to turn around and put that debts on the American people. Well, under our Constitution, we never gave them authority to do that. Our Constitution never said we elect politicians to sell our country. And that's what they're saying they're doing by the Federal Reserve creates funny money, paper that's not worth anything, and they give it to the corporate government, and what they get from the corporate government are worthless bonds. Now, in order for they're now going to try to say, oh no, those bonds are on the back of the American people. Well, no, a corporation doesn't have the authority to charge the American people for the debts that it has incurred. The government borrowed that money, well, that funny money, that paper from the Federal Reserve, and they gave the Federal Reserve paper back. None of that is real money. Our money under our Constitution is gold and silver. Now, they have stolen the rightful gold and silver that belongs to the American people, belongs to England, belongs to France, belongs to all the countries of the world. That money has been stolen. If worthless paper that the Federal Reserve made was used to buy gold, how do you give something worthless for something of value? That's fraud. Fraud was committed. Our government, the Federal Reserve, does not own that gold. That gold belongs to the people of the world. And it's time for the people of the world to take a stand and say, we want our gold back, we want our silver back. Every country that they've not just run this scam on America, folks, they've run this scam on every country of the world. And we need, first of all, to get an honest FBI in there. All our policing people. I can't think of what the name of them.
Police.
Yeah, I'll just say FBI and all our federal
CIA.
agents. Huh?
CIA.
Yeah, CIA. There's good CIA and there's bad CIA. Just like the FBI, there's good FBI and there's bad FBI. There's those who are patriots and those who have sold out. We need to get the patriots back in there, and they can do the investigation, because these bankers, one thing about them, they keep books. They know where all the gold is, they know where all the money is, they know where all the debts are. We need to get our FBI, and we got to get rid of the people that Trump put in there and get some honest people back in there, and then go after these bankers. This has been fraud and crimes against humanity, to create war, to create these depressions. How many people have died? How many people have suffered? You know, it's time for us, the American people, and the people of the world, not just the American people, to start standing up and take back our countries. You know, make our country the democracy that it was set up to be, and jail these bankers. You know, when we jail them all, we can seize all their assets, return it to who it's been stolen from. You know, and it has been stolen, folks. When you give paper that's worthless to buy gold, which is what they've done, they put the money in the stock market, they raise the stocks up real high, then they get the people that put their money into the stocks that are overinflated, knowing it's going to crash. Then they pull their money out and they buy gold with that money. That's what they've done this time. And silver. That money that they're buying with is funny money. So it's fraud. They bought gold fraudulently. They bought the wealth of our country fraudulently. And it's time for us, we the people, to wake up to what the scam is. Now, what they've done this time, again, the same as they did with Nazi Germany, they took all the businesses out of the United States and let the stock market crash, put it all into Germany, and Germany was producing all the factories. The same thing they've done this time. They've taken all the money and the wealth out of this country and they put it in China, and they own the factory. They own the factories in China. And the Chinese government, just like our government, has sold out. They get a cut from these rich bankers, just like the Russians sold out their people. All governments have sold out their own people, and now, just like they did in the Great Depression, we had the Great Depression. They put their money into Germany. Then, in order to build up America again, they needed the war, and then we produced all kinds of stuff for the war, and our economy boomed again. It's the same thing they're doing right now. They took all the money out of America, put it into China, made China the economic engine, supplying everything. Now they're going to say, and Trump is starting it right now, he wants to go to war with Iran. If we go to war with Iran, China is going to make its moves, and we're going to wind up in a war with China. And what's that war going to do? There goes the Great Depression that they've created again here. People are going to have jobs again. But if we have this next war, our environment can't handle it. right now, our environment is on the edge. If we have World War III, that's going to be the end of it for the whole planet. It's time for the people to wake up. We cannot go to war with Iran because it's going to bring us at war with China, and a lot of people are going to be cheering, oh yeah, we want the war because that's what got us out of the Great Depression in 1929. If we didn't have the war with Germany, we would have stayed in the Great Depression for much longer. And that's why they created this depression, folks, because they want to have World War III. And they also wanted...
Joe, you're acting like only getting into war gets you out of a depression. There would have been other ways if they had, worker ownership or, there's other economic methods other than monopoly.
Yeah, but unfortunately, the bankers and monopolies are controlling everything right now. Yeah, no, I'm for private enterprise. And people and that's one of the reasons also that with this coronavirus, they shut down bars, they shut down restaurants, they shut down all these little factories. That's because they want complete control, but it's time for the American people to wake up and stop going along with it, and we got to get honest people in our government right now, and we got to get out off the corporate government and back to a constitutional government. We need to have honest people in our FBI, in our CIA. We do have them, and even in our military. There are a lot of people in the military. I was in the military myself. I'm a veteran from Vietnam. And a lot of military took their oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States seriously. And it's time for all the people, from the top to the bottom, to start standing up for our constitutional form of government. And it's time to overthrow this corporate government that has enslaved us through funny money, through the Federal Reserve. It's time to do away with the Federal Reserve. It's time to jail all these bankers that have scammed everybody. And there's enough gold and wealth in the world that if it was put back in the hands of the people that it belongs to, that it was stolen from, we wouldn't be in a depression. So it really is time for us to jail the bankers and take back the wealth that belongs to the people. And when we do that, there won't be a depression. And that's pretty much, I'm done. How much time do we have?
We have to.
And one more thing. Trump has now taken trillions of dollars from the Federal Reserve to bail out the Wall Street people. Now, all that money that they printed is going to Wall Street and to the bankers, while they're putting out, right now, using this virus as the excuse, they're putting all the small businesses out of business. Now, Wall Street is going to start buying up. These rich guys are going to start buying it all up. And they've inflated the housing bubble. They're going to collapse the housing market. People who bought houses for, let's say you bought a house for $200,000. It was overinflated. You probably should have only paid at the most for a $200,000 house, $100,000. But now, if all these people start not being able to pay their mortgages, and more houses keep going on the market, the housing prices are going to drop. People are going to be losing their houses. The banks are going to be buying up all these houses. And where did they get the money? They got the money from the Federal Reserve, from the trillions that Trump has just borrowed from the Federal Reserve and given bonds to the Federal Reserve, and trying to say now not only are the people losing their houses, but we the people are going to owe that debt for all those bonds. And that's really our children and our grandchildren that debt is going to be on. We're looking at, we've already been pretty much slaves in this country, wage slaves, and our children are going to be even more wage slaves. Our children and our grandchildren are not going to be able to own their own homes. The banks are going to own them, and they're just going to be able to rent. Nobody's going to own anything. The people are not going to own anything unless we, the people, wake up and start demanding that the criminals that have created this situation be brought to justice. The biggest thing that we all should be doing right now is calling out the criminals and demanding that these criminals be jailed. First of all, brought to court. Everyone should have their day in court.
The courts have closed down, though, Joe.
Well, that's only temporary. The courts have closed down because of the scare of this virus. And this virus that's basically been created, when you really look at the facts on this virus,
the scare has been created.
Right, it's more been a scare than been facts. When you look at the amount of people that have gotten it, which is inflated because now, let's say in the time of flus, when young people got flus, they just stayed home and they were sick and then they got over it. But now they've created this scare, so everybody who gets a flu, or this virus, this coronavirus, which is basically just another flu, are going to the hospital. So the numbers are very high, you know. The more people are going in, they've got such a scare going. You get a little sniffles, and right away they go to the hospital. Oh, you got a sniffles, you got a fever, you have the corona. And they've created such a scare with this that they've inflated the numbers. But if you really look at the numbers that are dying, which are mostly old people or sick people already, is not much more, if more, than what the normal flu does, you know. And it's time for the American people to stop being sheep and being so afraid of government. You look at it, don't matter. You look at NBC News. They're fear, 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 corona, corona, corona. You look at Fox News, fear, 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 corona, corona. You look at MSNBC, fear, fear, fear. You look at Amy Goodman, fear, 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 corona, corona. You know, Rachel Maddow, fear, 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 corona, corona. You know, that's the big money people, the bankers and those. Basically, 5 corporations control all the media that you see. They've created such fear for the American people. They don't want you to gather, you know. You might protest, you know.
Or you might figure out the scam.
Yeah, you might figure out the scam. You might talk to your neighbors. It's time for the American people. If we, the people, don't wake up and start bringing about... It took a revolution in this country. The founding fathers stood against the king, who had all the power to create a democracy, to create a republican form of government. Republic, you know, a democratic republic is what they formed. And it's time for us, we the people, to get back our republican form of government and to bring the Constitution back in and get rid of this corporate government. The United States of America is a corporate government. It's not the government of the founding fathers. And it's time for us to bring back that government. And
I thought corporations go by democracy. You know, in democracy, 51% can rule, but a republic protects the minority.
Well, a Republican democracy is different than just a democracy. In a regular democracy, 51% can make 49% illegal. But in a Republican democracy, we the people pick our leaders, but we have a constitution which applies to everyone. Our constitution and the laws of our constitution apply to Trump, to the bankers, to the big corporations, to everyone, the same as it does the wino on the street. And it's time for us to have that form of government where the laws apply equally to everyone, and look what Trump has done when he's been in there. All his buddies who were convicted of lying to the FBI, of hiding evidence, what did Trump do? He pardoned them, So what he's saying is, if you're a member of the club, if you're a rich fat cat, or you go along with me, and you go along with the New World Order, then the laws don't apply to you. We can pardon you. But if you're a kid on the street smoking the pot, you're going to go to jail, So we need the American people to wake up and demand equal justice for all. And it's time for us to look at all the politicians that have now been accused of insider trading. They knew, because of their position as senators and congressmen, they knew when to invest in what in the market and when to pull their money out, and
when to invest in respirators.
Yeah. And the rest of us are, if you got caught doing insider trading, you would go to jail. So it's time for we the people to start jailing all these people that have. We're putting low people who barely broke the law in jail, in prison for a long time. Marijuana people, unfortunately drug addicts. We're filling our prison with them. And who created most of the situations that caused the drug addicts? Poverty created that.
What created poverty? Monopoly.
Monopolies, right. And we used to have laws against monopolies. And then the politicians took away the laws on monopoly, So now we got a few corporations control all our media. We got a few corporations control the internet. Let's say right now you wanted to start a business. Let's say you figured out how to make the best lollipops, right? And you are making lollipops, and you say, okay, I'm going to sell on the internet. I'm going to let everybody know that I have these super lollipops, right? Now, the internet is set up so Amazon or the big people that are selling, they can watch it. And they say, look at this. This lollipop guy's making a lot of money. So now they start producing lollipops. And now the search engines that would have, if I typed in, where can I get lollipops? The search engine would have used to bring me to the guy who invented the new cool lollipop. But now the search engine is going to bring me to Amazon. And it's going to, now that guy who just started his own business and started making money just went out of business because nobody is hearing or getting to him, and everybody is now going to the Amazon lollipop factory, and it's time for people. You have to wake up to what's going on. There's no freedom on the internet. I'm going to try to put this up on the internet, and I know that they're going to do everything they can to keep people from seeing what I'm saying, you know? And not just me. There's a whole lot of people speaking the truth, and the search engines are set up, or they'll say, if you were one of those people who are saying the coronavirus is a scam, it's not any worse than than the flu, which I happen to have right now, and not corona. And if you were a doctor even saying, well, you know what, I've done the research and I know that the flu kills more people than this coronavirus, and the numbers are skewed because everybody's so afraid. As soon as they get a little sniffle, they go to the hospital, and the hospital's saying coronavirus. So they're jacking numbers up to scare the hell out of everybody. Now, if you were a doctor and you started telling the truth and you put it up on the internet, they're going to say, oh, no, this is false, what do they call it? False...
Positive?
No.
False advertising?
Yeah, no. Fake news. They're going to say, oh, this is fake news, and they're going to take it down, you know. Then there's no free speech anymore on the internet. They can turn around and say, let's say you want to educate your kids and you want to tell them truth and you don't want to be part of this Common Core, you know, which is to dumb down our kids. And if you go on the internet and start saying Common Core is a scam, then they're going to make sure the search engines don't bring people to you. And the search engines are going to go to the Common Core site and tout that. So right now, it's time for people to really be careful when you go on the internet, because they're only feeding you what they want you to know. And the people who are telling the truth, they're silencing. You know, Paula has had her shows up on the internet. They cut her out of, she can't even get on her own site to put up any more videos, or when people leave comments on her stuff, she can't answer them.
In the identity that I created, it's been stolen.
Right.
I could put up new videos, but I would have to consent to the theft, which I don't.
Right. And so many people who've been trying to tell you the truth have been censored on the internet. So be real weary of what you hear and what you see on the internet, especially all this fear, corona fear, corona fear, corona fear. You know, look what they've done with this corona fear. It's not, more people ain't dying from the corona than die from the flu every year. And they've never shut down all these bars, restaurants, factories, stores.
For $30,000 a year on flu.
Right. For the amount of people on flu. And just as many people die from the flu as are dying from this. Now the numbers of people that are...
No, more people died from the flu.
Yeah, more people have died from the flu.
Because there's 200 viruses in a common cold or a flu, and corona's only 15%.
Yeah.
So many more are dying of flu than of corona.
Right. And when they tell you that the numbers of corona, people with corona are so high, because they've created such fear, everybody who's got a sniffle or a temperature is going to the hospital instead of back in the days when people just had flus. A lot of people, they went to bed, they ate chicken soup or had something, you know, took some vitamins and laid down and rested. Not everybody went running scared to the hospital. So our numbers are skewed real high.
Or the hospital would send them home. Now the hospital keeps them so young people spread it.
Right.
Whereas they usually go home, now they're in the hospital.
Yeah.
So their way of managing it seems to encourage the spreading.
Right. Right. So it's been scare, scare, scare. I'm not scared, folks, and you shouldn't be either. Not to the point that they're keeping you locked within your house, and you've chosen to do that. You have chosen, oh, the flu's out there. I got to keep away from everybody. I mean, the corona is out there, you know. I don't have corona, folks. I have a bad cough. I'm a heavy smoker, and I got some sniffles because I got a cold. But other than that, I'm not worried about coronavirus, folks. And it's time for me to say to all of you, first of all, stand up for your rights. We want our constitutional form of government back. We want this corporate government dissolved. And we the people, do not take on the debt that the politicians have piled up. They took funny money that had no value. It's paper, fiat currency from the Federal Reserve. And they gave fiat bonds from a corporation that's already bankrupt to the Federal Reserve. Now they're going to try to say, oh, the people owe this debt. Wait a minute. Nobody asked the people. The politicians made all these decisions, and the politicians were all financed by the bankers to make these decisions. Who do you think pays for their campaigns? Millions of dollars to get to be like, look at this one guy. He paid $500 million to try to run for president. The billionaire. Bloomberg, right? Who would pay $500 million for a job that only pays $500,000 a year? You know, unless you want to be an insider and be able to make your money. And almost all these politicians, they go in with a little bit of money, and by the time they retire, they're mega rich. And that's because they're in that insider position, which if you and I did, we'd go to jail. But I'm going to sign off on that, and it's time for the American people to wake up and start demanding that we have honest government, that we have a constitutional form of government, and that the criminals that have destroyed our country, jail them, the bankers.